These are 100% preventable injuries, 100% preventable.
Doctors on the front lines demanding action. Fox 45 sitting down with the shock trauma doctors in the midst of the ongoing youth crime crisis. So Annapolis lawmakers returned for a special session to address juvenile crime. We asked the governor for his response. And a staple of Maryland cuisine here to stay, the new encouraging crab population numbers in the Chesapeake Bay.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 6.
Good evening, I'm Maxine Stryker in for Mary Bubala tonight. In a city in crisis, we continue our conversation with the doctors on the front line of the youth crime crisis. They're speaking out and sounding the alarm as more and more young people become the faces of crime and violence. For children growing up in Baltimore City,
At the top stories we're following from the
carry illegal firearms in our
violence can be a part of everyday life.
Living in a city where violence is rampant is considered an adverse childhood experience.
This year, as juvenile violence spikes in the city, no one is more intimately familiar with the pain and suffering of children than those on the front lines. Dr. Thomas Scalea, Chief of Shock Trauma, Dr. Stephen Zinn, Director of the University of Maryland Children's Hospital, and Dr. Rebecca Carter, a leading pediatrician at the University of Maryland Medical Center, sitting down with us for an honest conversation. Last year you said that you and your staff were feeling beaten down. Are you still feeling that way?
Absolutely. It's just so discouraging, the violence in general. You know, you can fix distracted driving and all of those things, and there will still be vehicular crashes because there's human error, there's weather, there's all of those things. But I don't know where it's written down that you have to pick up a gun and shoot somebody. That doesn't have to be. And so this is, as far as I'm concerned, these are 100% preventable injuries.
Well, I think we haven't seen a change, but I think what's more disturbing is the number of kids that are either dying as a result of gunshot or being injured as a result of a gunshot.
This year, 10 children have been killed in Baltimore City. Why do you think Baltimore children feel that violence is often the answer?
I think that it really speaks to the normalization of violence in the city. And this is maybe a little off topic, but what other city has the major newspaper report homicides every week? I've never, when I got here, I said, this, really? If you look at the homicides, the day that Freddie Gray died, and they've never come back down.
With bloodshed ingrained into the fabric of Baltimore, the doctors agree everyone has an obligation to make a difference in this fight.
This isn't a political fight. It's not a medical fight or set of issues. It's about the health of the public in Baltimore, and this is a huge problem for those people, for the citizens of the city, and the conversations need to be driven with that framework.
Another important topic we discussed with the doctors was their part in a national campaign, It Doesn't Kill to Ask. The campaign focused on destigmatizing the conversation about guns and their safe storage.
We have a lot of hesitancy about asking about where guns are stored, how they're stored, how do we keep them out of the hands of young adults and certainly out of children. And I think this is a conversation that everybody should be a lot more open to having in the coming weeks and months if we're going to start to make a difference.
To see my full 30-minute interview with Doctors Carter, Scalea, and Zinn, just point your phone's camera to that QR code right there at the bottom of your screen or go to your webpage, foxbaltimore.com. Next week, the Baltimore City Council set to hold a hearing on a curfew in an effort to reduce juvenile crime. In Annapolis, lawmakers have wrapped up their work for this year without taking action on the crime crisis here in Baltimore. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor asked the governor if lawmakers should return for a special session.
Well, as this crisis remains front and center for our hospital workers, we're still waiting for the governor to get back with us with a response to their concerns. We reached out to his office today asking what new solutions he can offer. Instead, his office sending us an old press release from earlier this week. Behind the doors of the University of Maryland Shock Trauma Center, every life struck by gun violence hits home.
It's just part of every day of our lives, and it's not a very good part of every day of our lives.
And this year, the victims are getting younger. So far, at least 10 Baltimore City teens have been shot and killed and dozens more injured.
The number has to be less. It just has to be.
In an exclusive interview with Fox 45, the doctors on the front lines of juvenile crime putting out a call to action, with lawmakers doing little to combat the crisis this session. The state legislature typically meets for about 3 months each year. However, the governor holds the power to call lawmakers back at any time for a special session. That power currently at play in Tennessee. Governor Bill Lee calling a special session to address gun reform a month after a mass shooting at a Nashville school. And in Washington, Governor Jay Inslee doing the same to address drug abuse. But back in Maryland,
we have an epidemic.
Governor Wes Moore acknowledging the issue, but unable to offer direct answers. Today, Fox 45 sending questions to the governor's office asking, what is your response to the shock trauma doctor's concerns? Will you call a special session to address juvenile violence? And if not, what is your message to families who have lost children to gun violence this year? His response, a press release sent out earlier this week with his remarks from a recent bill signing event. Governor Moore saying, quote, by this time tomorrow, another 2 Marylanders will have died from gun violence based on current trends. Many of these victims will likely be children. He goes on to say, when tragedy strikes and we do nothing, we know we are contending with more than a gun violence issue. We are contending with a world that has given up, and that's how progress dies.
Why aren't you doing something?
But political analyst John Deedy flipping that back on the governor.
They need to take stronger action in order to deal with this problem.
Deedy arguing the lack of progress stems from Governor Moore and Maryland lawmakers' lack of action.
Whether it is finding a way to get more of these guns off the streets or tougher penalties to deal with this type of thing, but they definitely need to get more involved in this than to wait another 9 months before another session comes. And making this issue especially urgent, summer is just around the corner. And as we know from crime trends in years past, as the weather warms up here in Baltimore City, so does violence. In Baltimore City, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
Baltimore County officially confirms Dr. Miriam Yarbrough as the new school superintendent. The state superintendent approved her appointment in a letter shared with our Project Baltimore team this afternoon. In it, the state says it's committed to help Dr. Yarbrough's mission to bring Baltimore County back to the top of the state academically.
I was here as a first-year teacher, and I remember when Baltimore County Public Schools, we were at the top of the state. It is my intention to work together with you, the community, our staff, all stakeholders, and our students, first and foremost, to get back to the top of the state and the nation.
Yarbrough was recently named in a wrongful termination suit filed in Baltimore County, but she received positive feedback at this week's hearing. Dr. Yarbrough's contract begins July 1st. She is the county's 4th superintendent in 6 years after Dr. Darrell Williams decided not to renew his contract. Maxine?
The EPA is addressing last year's water contamination in Baltimore, saying the city did not comply with the Safe Water Drinking Act when dealing with that crisis. The EPA also says Baltimore has not fully complied with the 2010 order requiring the city to cover or treat its uncovered reservoirs at Druid Lake and Ashburton. The projects come with other upgrades to the surrounding parks, too, which a former city council president says is part of the problem.
I think there's poor management on all levels. There are people who exploited the requirements by EPA to do a lot of other things, and that may be one of the reasons why this thing is taking so long.
The order requires the city to respond to the EPA and MDE within 7 days, conduct monthly monitoring and sampling of those two reservoirs, and submit monthly progress reports to the EPA, among other things. Maryland Department of Natural Resources releasing a new survey showing the number of blue crabs in the Chesapeake Bay has gone up. According to the Blue Crab Winter Dredge Survey, the population has gone from 227 million crabs last year to 323 million crabs this year. Officials say despite the uptick, they are continuing to remain vigilant as numbers of juvenile crabs have been below average for the past 4 years. The battle between Disney and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis continues, coming up the latest move in their ongoing feud.
Is the federal government willing to spend trillions of dollars to pay reparations to Black Americans? It's a bill already in the works. I'm Scott Thuman in Washington with a closer look coming up.
And planning out for this evening into the overnight hours, temperatures fall from the 60s back down into the 50s. Not as cool as what you woke up to this morning. We could have some warmer temperatures, but unfortunately rain too in time for Preakness. I'm going to plan it out. My Weather Authority forecast.
Amid an ongoing feud with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Disney has announced they have canceled plans for a new campus in Orlando. In a statement, the company says that new leadership and changing business conditions motivated the cancellation. The development would have brought more than 2,000 jobs to Florida. A spokesperson for Governor DeSantis says it's Disney's decision leading to a restructuring of its business that's to blame. And Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene introduces articles of impeachment against President Biden. She is accusing him of endangering Americans by not reinforcing immigration laws. House Republicans do not have enough votes to impeach Biden, though. The White House calling Greene's articles a political stunt. The authors of a new bill in Washington say the nation should give more than $14 trillion in reparations to the descendants of slaves, but Can the country afford it? Sinclair's chief political correspondent Scott Thuman joins us live with the details on this story tonight. Scott?
Yeah, good evening to you. It's not the first time that lawmakers here on Capitol Hill have debated reparations. In fact, according to the Washington Post, it's brought up every session since 1989, but never this big. Talked about for decades, but now getting new life. A bill to give federal reparations for Black Americans to help compensate for an oppressive past with a more liberating tomorrow.
We're not here to request that future. We're here to demand it.
Yeah.
Right. We need that future now. Reparations now.
Reparations now.
Congresswoman Cori Bush introducing a bill calling for $14 trillion for Black Americans to help close the racial wealth gap with white citizens and make transformative changes in housing, healthcare, and education. How to pay for it all, unclear, but they suggested America already pays for, quote, forever wars, sending huge sums overseas. That proposed $14 trillion, though, almost half of America's entire national debt. And speaking of,
if Washington wants to spend more, it will have to come together, find savings elsewhere, just like every single household in America.
The most heated debate in Washington now is over how not to default as the country struggles to pay its bills.
We're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country.
Meanwhile, a reparations task force in California is recommending possibly billions of dollars in payments there for a state already facing an almost $32 billion budget shortfall. More states considering similar paths, though some Black scholars suggest expanded welfare benefits, educational scholarships, and other programs have already made a difference.
All of that was reparations for what had happened before. Some of those things work, like affirmative action. Some of them didn't, like the Community Reinvestment Act. But that was reparations.
And more possibly on the way. Now, it's uncertain what kind of chances this bill might have, and we don't know yet what kind of support it may also get from the White House, although plenty of Republicans already lining up against it. And interesting note here, when you look at what's going on in California, even Governor Gavin Newsom there has yet to show real public backing for the kind of spending there. On Capitol Hill tonight, I'm Scott Thuman, Fox 45 News.
All right, thanks for joining us, Scott. Well, it's the first in a while for both the Ravens and Commanders. The two teams announcing they're going to get together this summer to hold joint practices at the Ravens facility. They'll clash August 15th and 16th ahead of their preseason game, and it should be a real treat for the fans.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
A double rainbow was visible across Salt Lake City on Wednesday. These form when sunlight is refracted and reflected twice within raindrops. The color sequence of the secondary rainbow on the right is opposite the primary one. This impressive supercell thunderstorm was captured in the Texas Panhandle, while an offshore thunderstorm lit up the night sky off the Florida Panhandle.
For more content like this, follow the National Weather Desk on Instagram.
A controversial bill drawing backlash from the Texas trans community coming up, the effect Senate Bill 15 will have on college sports. A controversial bill on transgender athletes in college sports almost on its way to the Texas governor's desk. It's sparking outrage in the LGBTQ plus community. Adele Oshefta from our Sinclair sister station in Austin has both sides of this debate.
Senate Bill 15 would require college athletes to play on teams that align with their sex at birth.
Senate Bill 15 is about protecting women from undue physical harm and making sure that all athletic competitions for women are safe.
The bill's author, Representative Valerie Swanson, and other Republican women stood together as Senate Bill 15 came up for debate.
Senate Bill 15 is about taking a principled stand for Texas women and ensuring that not a single woman loses a scholarship, a roster spot, or a second of playing time to a biological male.
It is just one of several bills aimed at transgender people this session. On Tuesday, the House passed Senate Bill 14, which bans gender-affirming treatment for minors.
That was an incredibly hard moment for our community. This is another moment where, again, the weight is falling on top of people that are bearing the brunt of this attack and really just feeling awful about it.
Ricardo Martinez is the CEO of Equality Texas, an advocacy group for the LGBTQ community.
There are so many things that we can do right now to help and protect women, help sports, and it's not banning transgender athletes.
John Busey represents Cedar Park and Leander in the Texas House.
Senate Bill 15 does nothing to save women's sports. This bill does nothing to support Title IX, and it does nothing to address the real and documented threats to equal access.
But conservative lobbyists Texas values disagree. Megan Benton is an intern.
Well, my take on Senate Bill 15 is that this is a great opportunity for us to protect women's sports at the collegiate level.
I reached out to the NCAA, the governing body of competitive college-level sports, and they did not directly address Senate Bill 15. Quote, the NCAA's current transgender student-athlete participation policy aligns with the Olympic movement and balances fairness, inclusion, and safety for all student-athletes. According to Inside Higher Ed magazine, there are currently 32 transgender athletes in collegiate sports around the country, which leaves the bill's critics wondering why it's up for debate.
Senate Bill 15 is yet again a solution in search of a problem and unworthy of serious consideration by this body.
All right, here we go. Taking a look at the Fox triple cast this evening. The Mile 1 Townsend cam below. You see some of that hazy sunshine. Toyota East General Harbor sky cam above. Real nice, except again a little bit of that haze, but sunshine still breaking through nicely. And the HD radar showing a little bit of rain down to our south. That's going to be our next weather maker. That's going to drift northbound with the potential of rain as we head toward Preakness on Saturday. Now, I did mention some of that haze. If you wouldn't believe it, upstairs in the atmosphere, I was just doing some research on a social media post. The winds are actually bringing in some wildfire smoke from southern and western Canada, all the way from there across the northern United States into the northeast and the mid-Atlantic. And we've actually got some moderate to high levels of smoke upstairs in the atmosphere. So the reason we have some of the haze is just because of that. 68 right now, going to have a beautiful sunset likely because of that haze. Winds out of the southeast at 10 miles an hour, humidity 37%, nice and dry, and the dew point is low too at 41 degrees as we take a gorgeous look at the Toyota HD Harbor sky cam this late afternoon into this evening. I wish I could say this gorgeous weather will hold until Preakness on Saturday, but we are going to see a gradual degrading of this gorgeous trend that we've had. Right now, it's 68 degrees here in Baltimore, 69 at Cockeysville, 70 at Westminster, 68 at Columbia, 66 Stevensville, and 68 down at Easton. Now, I guess the good news is, although we do expect that some of this moisture that's down to the south and also pairing up with the system that's out to our west kind of comes together gradually, does increase clouds, and maybe an extra risk of potentially some showers around here as we work our way into the day on Saturday. I think we're going to see a lot of dry air that's kind of entrenched as the system moves in. So it's going to be hard to get a whole lot of rain out of this. So temperatures right now, again, they are in the, or they will be dropping into the 50s and low 60s. Pardon my wide view of our future scan here. But there we go. As we zoom in a little bit, you'll see that there's some rain that's off to the east as we head towards Saturday, and then some rain out to the west. What happens here? Well, that system that's out to the west transfers energy off to the coast. And what that's going to mean for us is we're kind of in a little bit of a void of precipitation. So that's going to be some better news for the Preakness forecast. Dry day, mostly cloudy for tomorrow in the exclusive 10-day forecast. 30% chance of a sprinkle or some light showers around on Saturday with a high 77, near 80, and some partial sun on Sunday. So, of course, just after Preakness, no rain. But even that rain on Preakness Day is looking very light and few and far between. Temperatures near 80 to wrap up that 7-day forecast out on 3 days to make it the 10-day, mid to upper 80s into next weekend.
Well, not so bad. Finally tonight, we are wishing a happy birthday to an Orioles legend. Hall of Famer Brooks Robinson turns 86 years old today. The human vacuum cleaner, as he's known, spent his entire 23-year career with the O's, leading the team to World Series titles in 1966 and 1970. Robinson was selected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1983. That's all for Fox 45 News at 6. Family Feud is next. Kyle, see you tonight at 10. Have a great night.